On this program, exploring a coral reef, collecting shells, and understanding a meteorological phenomenon, the hurricane. Corals grow all around the planet, under tropical seas and oceans, in an area that spans either side of the equator. They come in an extraordinary diversity of colors and shapes. There are about 2,500 different species of them. The coral ecosystem is the richest, the most varied, and spared human intervention. Probably the most resistant of all Earth's ecosystems. Warm seas harbor a nature rich in colors and shapes of all kinds. In this magical world stands a mysterious garden a visitor might think is made of stones and plants. It is in fact a coral reef, and those dome-shaped boulders, tree-like shapes, and fragile, lacy clusters that make up the coral reef are actually colonies of animals. If, for example, you examine a branch of coral very closely, you will see that its surface is swarming with a host of tiny creatures, 1 to 3 millimeters long. These organisms, called polyps, are closely related to sea anemones. Like the sea anemone, each polyp is essentially a hollow cylinder or sac. This sac opens outward by a small central slit that serves as a mouth. Surrounding the mouth are 1 or more rings of tentacles. The tentacles serve to catch food particles in suspension around the animal and carry them to its mouth. However, unlike the sea anemone, the polyp produces a calcium carbonate base. This base constitutes the polyp's skeleton, in which it is immovably fixed, and which also serves as a refuge. Indeed, the polyp is able to escape from predators by retracting inside its skeletal cup. When the polyp dies, its calcareous skeleton subsists. To it are added thousands of others, and as they accumulate, a coral reef is born. There also exist Gorgonian corals, which have a flexible internal skeleton. Their skeleton is formed by a central axial rod that branches out into a jelly-like tissue. The tentacle-rimmed mouths of the polyps emerge at the surface of this tissue. This type of skeleton gives the colony an erect, branching appearance, similar to that of a plant or a feather. Consisting of a flexible, horny material called gorgonin, this skeleton enables the colony to bend in currents. It also enables it to swivel around and thus to present its greatest surface to the prevailing current, so that each polyp is exposed to a maximum amount of food particles. Corals, Gorgonian, and others feed on bacteria, dissolved organic matter, and zooplankton, microscopic creatures living in suspension in water. But for the most part, corals draw their sustenance from unicellular algae that live in the superficial tissues of polyps. That algae, called zooxanthellae, lives symbiotically with the corals. The zooxanthellae and corals entertain an intimate relationship that is advantageous to both. The corals provide the zooxanthellae with a protected environment and an abundance of nutrients. In return, through photosynthesis, the algae produce sugars and oxygen, both necessary for the coral's nutrition and respiration. Zooxanthellae multiply very rapidly inside the polyps. They occur in such concentrations that they often provide most of the color seen in coral. Given the benefits the corals and zooxanthellae derive from their symbiotic relationship, that color is a sign of vitality. On the other hand, coral bleaching indicates that the zooxanthellae have been expelled and that the coral has died. To develop in good health, corals need clean, clear water that allows the sunlight the zooxanthellae need for photosynthesis to penetrate. It is for that same reason that corals establish themselves in shallow waters. Corals grow best in a mean temperature of 24 degrees Celsius. A temperature of less than 16 degrees is lethal to them. They thrive better in waters subjected to marine currents and waves, as this provides them with more nutrients. Marine scientists are concerned about the health of our coral reefs. They know that one of the signs of a healthy coral is the diversity of the species inhabiting it. Their research therefore consists of making an inventory of all the coral species in the reef. Some species, however, cannot be identified with the naked eye. The researchers then collect minute samples of such species. In the laboratory, they plunge the samples into an acid bath so as to dissolve the calcium carbonate. As the calcium carbonate disappears, spicules, small needle-like processes, appear. Under a microscope, the researcher examines the spicules, which, depending on the species, can vary considerably in shape and color. Once he has identified the species, the researcher adds its name to the list of species found in the reef under study. These lists are useful in following the evolution of the reefs over time. Corals are extremely fragile. Divers should always bear in mind that a mere touch can be deadly to these living beings that took centuries to become the splendid stone castles they are today. The greatest threats to coral reefs are pollution and disrespectful tourists. Other species belonging to the mollusk family are similarly endangered. Shellfish. Who has not been fascinated by the sculpture of a shell left on the beach in the wake of a wave? For some, the fascination is such that it becomes a scientific pastime, collecting shells in order to find out more about the living creatures that make up the family of mollusks. Mollusks are animals with soft bodies, which are generally enclosed in a calcareous shell. The experienced shell collector, or sheller, is seldom satisfied with the empty shells he finds on the beach, since they are often damaged by the rolling waves. Instead, he will prefer living individuals with all their soft parts that enable him to identify them accurately. At low tide, the sheller will go off to explore the sea bottom. He never takes more than 2 specimens of a same species. He refrains from disturbing immature live shells, as well as endangered ones. The sheller collects his specimens by gently raking the mucky bottom with a dredge. The dredge will pick up any mollusks burrowed there. In his search, the sheller is careful to disturb the environment he is exploring as little as possible. In his shelling, the collector is usually looking for 2 species of mollusks in particular, gasteropods and bivalves. Individuals of other species are less interesting to him because their shells are much more rudimentary or simply non-existent, as is the case of the octopus. In gasteropods and bivalves, the shell consists essentially of 3 overlapping layers. First, a thin layer composed of a protein substance called conchiolin, forms the outer shell. The other two layers consist of calcium carbonate crystals set in a fine conchiolin framework. In the middle calcareous layer, the crystals are prismatic. In the inner layer, they are laid down in sheets. The shells of gasteropods generally have a conical shape. They come in a wide range of different shapes, from very flat to very broad ones. The cone spirals round a central axis called the columella. In most gasteropods, the shell is spiraled clockwise, in which case it is said to be dextral. To find out if a shell is dextral, the shell is held with the spire up and the aperture facing the observer. In this position, dextral shells present the aperture on the right-hand side. If the aperture is on the left, the shell is said to be sinistral. The sinistral spiral is, however, much less common. As their name suggests, bivalves consist of two convex valves. The two valves are joined together by an elastic ligament that pulls them open. Their closure is ensured by the contraction of two large muscles attached to the inner surface of the shell. The valve's outer surfaces display a series of concentric striations. These striations are shallow, parallel depressions or narrow bands caused by oscillation and growth. In many species, these striations help to evaluate the animal's age. Once he has finished his collecting, the sheller proceeds to extract the soft parts from the shell. When cleaning a gasteropod, he removes the operculum and carefully preserves it. He then glues it to a piece of cotton batten and inserts it into the shell. For every sample collected, he records the date and place of the finding, the depth of the water, the type of bottom. For years, species identification has been based on the results of the work of taxonomists. Taxonomy is the science of classification of living organisms. Research conducted in this area sometimes lead to the discovery of new species never before described. Such was the case of two new species of bivalves. They are the smallest known bivalves. They measure less than 700 microns. Both new species have been added to the 100,000 others composing the branch of mollusks. Indeed, the mollusk family has one of the greatest diversities of species in the animal kingdom. Nature lovers will therefore never cease to wonder at the variety of the attire with which these primitive animals have chosen to protect their vulnerable bodies. Too often, humankind threatens Mother Nature, but she can dish it out as good as she gets. With hurricanes, for example, which unleash torrential rains and titanic winds on human settlements. With their beautiful beaches and mild climate, the coastlines and the warm seas are truly a paradise on Earth. However, toward the end of summer, a threat lurks on the horizon of these idyllic places: hurricanes. In Asia, such tropical storms are called typhoons or cyclones, but those that form over the Atlantic Ocean are called hurricanes. Stated very simply, hurricanes are giant whirlwinds in which air moves in a large, tightening spiral around a relatively calm center, the eye of the hurricane. Near the rim of the eye, these winds may gust at speeds of more than 250 kilometers per hour. Torrential rains and a series of dense clouds also accompany the storm. A mature hurricane will cover an area of several hundred square kilometers. These huge, violent windstorms are steered by the trade winds that surround them. Less strong, these winds blow mainly toward the northwest, but they can be unpredictable. Hurricanes generally develop when a zone of low pressure comes into contact with warm surface waters, such as a tropical sea at the end of the summer, for example. The warm, moist air over the warm waters seeks to fill the void created by the low pressure zone. Drawn by the rotation of the Earth, the warm air spirals upward. As it rises, the air cools. The moisture it contains condenses into water droplets. These form clouds and rains that descend back into the storm. The condensation also releases latent heat, which lowers the pressure and causes the air to rise even farther. At an altitude of about 15,000 meters, most of the ascending air is propelled outward by the surrounding winds. By eliminating air at the top of the column, more air is drawn in at the bottom. Today, meteorologists have various means at their disposal to help them predict whether a hurricane will strike the coastline. One is the observation of satellite images. These images identify and locate low-pressure zones, which generally appear as rotating cloud masses. Another source of information for meteorologists are the images transmitted by ground-based Doppler radar systems. These images describe the intensity within the hurricane. They also provide precise data on the direction and speed of the raindrops and consequently of the winds. To visualize a hurricane's path, these radar images can be computerized. Through a scale of colors, these images translate the intensity of the rains inside the hurricane. Hot colors, approaching red, indicate the areas, especially at the rim of the eye, where the heaviest rains are falling. Conversely, cool colors, ranging to blue, represent calmer areas, such as the eye of the hurricane. The scientists are still working to gather even more detailed information on the characteristics of hurricanes. To do so, they fly through hurricanes in aircraft equipped with various measuring instruments. One such instrument is a radar attached to the tail of the aircraft. This radar produces the same kind of measurements as the land-based radars. Another device fastened under the wings evaluates the electrical charges carried by rainfall particles. This measurement provides a reading on the storm's level of electrification. During the flight, parachute-borne dropsondes, canisters containing weather instruments, are dropped from the plane into the eye. As each dropsonde floats down to the sea, it records information on weather, humidity, pressure, speed, and wind direction. The information is transmitted to the plane via radio waves. All the data gathered on board the aircraft, as well as by the satellites and coastal radars, is fed into computers. The computers analyze the data and predict how the hurricane will most likely develop, based upon various mathematical models. One is the statistical model. It predicts the intensity and future movement of a hurricane according to past hurricanes, which presented similar characteristics such as location and moment of development. A second model, called digital, uses a series of mathematical equations describing the fundamental principles of fluid physics. When a computer is fed a map that describes a hurricane's temperature, wind, and rainfall at a given moment, It solves the series of equations. The resulting answer will correspond to the future position of the hurricane. More reliable than its statistical counterpart, the digital model also provides a better reading on the path the hurricane will take. It is not, however, able to predict any changes in its intensity. Even though at present these computer tools do not always provide very accurate information, they still help to save human lives.
The main reason hurricanes are given names is to avoid confusion. A first name is concise, easy to remember, and to relate to. Perhaps it also helps to allay our fears in the face of such a devastating force.